mechanical and technical parts of it are correct. So we'll start off here in the doorway. This particular building, and we really have decided to have the programs here because this building is a building that needs a lot of renovation. As I do the presentation, you'll see that. We have 22 doors in this particular building, and as you look at the doors, you see that there's this metal piece here, and there are these long tube poles that are put in there. And as time passes and dirt, grime, salt, ice, and everything gets in there, it breaks it down. Unfortunately, because these doorway parts are so very old, they're hard to find. I don't even know if you can find them anymore.
We've been buying a few that are off the shelf, but they're not making them. The closures that she's talking about are buried underneath the door. And they call them a pot, and they're about that big, and they're buried under the door, and that's what closes it. There's a spring in it, and it's in oil. And after time, the salt and the sand just rots them out. And they're over $400 a piece, and we can't get them anymore.
Yeah, if you could get them. But see, here's the problem. This is a safety and security issue. You see this door? This door was closed, but you got to pull it in order to latch it. And then it can, over time, because that part is worn out, it becomes loose and can be easily opened. So these are things
As the
that we need.
kids egress it, they don't lock by themselves. The teachers, people go out, the doors don't come back and close and lock by themselves. You got to stop and turn around and check it. And with students and teachers, it don't usually happen.
It doesn't always happen.
It makes a security problem.
Right, I'm going to take you through these doors, and we're going to go through
The smaller kids have an awful hard time coming in.
I'm going to take you through our gym to our back gym.
Yes, that's a beautiful example.
It's progressed since 1956-57 when this building was occupied. Things have been taken care of when needed. Unfortunately, we have a lot of things now that need repair. This building has served us well for 40 years, and now we're looking to take care of some of those problems. This is what we call the back gym. And as you can see, it's divided up into two workstations when we drop down this flap. And this means the teacher can have as many as 20 juniors or seniors or sophomores all in this area trying to do whatever athletic activity the plan is for. As you can tell, that would make a very close quarters for, big, strapping young ladies and gentlemen. So this will then become part of the new gym that we're proposing. Right now, because we have such small quarters, we have to have very small classes. If we were able to have larger area for the workstation, the teacher stations to be, we would be able to have larger classes. I'd like to draw your attention to the climbing wall. It is a wonderful example of how people in the community and the people on this staff work together to construct something that is very exciting. If you saw this in another place in New York State, they would tell you that it was a very costly item. We were fortunate to have people who volunteered their time and effort to create that for us. So we're very proud of that. And as you can see, someone already pointed out, we have our heating and our ventilation areas need to be improved, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that during the presentation. We're now going to go to the mudroom. This will be a little bit of a trip down the stairs and up the stairs. These people have sneakers on, it's a good idea. It's a hike. Players often will come in from the field, to take off their equipment. We use this as our area that our students do their conditioning, fitness activities. As you can see, they share this space with our storage area. But I do want to say, as a point of pride, that our booster club has provided us with all of this beautiful equipment at no cost to the district. And I'm very pleased that they care so much about our children and what happens to them. Again, the issue is space. And in this particular area, the issue is also ventilation. As you can imagine, as you're working up your heart rate, you're going to be, needing a lot of nice air. And right now we have a fan, and we do the very best we can. We would be looking forward to when we build a new gym above the gym, will be a place for us to put all this beautiful equipment that's been provided so generously to us by the Booster Club. But everybody has saw a problem that needs to be resolved, find a space to put the equipment, and they have done so. And sometimes it gets really tight in here with a class. If you look up there, when you saw our flyer and you looked at the electrical system that it illustrated there, that is what we're talking about. That is original equipment that came with the building in 1956-57 when it was constructed and occupied. And I always like the fact that even though this is
a box up here too, this is what runs all our lights. This kind of lead cord running off for it.
Can you see that over there?
It's kind of a fire trap, actually. Really looking at it.
I always find it amazing when I look at this room and I look at the floor and I see how hard our maintenance and our custodians have worked to keep it up, to put it back together. And as any of you have old utilities, you know that once they get a certain age, it's hard, as I told you on the door, to get parts to replace it. And obviously this isn't adequate lighting for a room like this. So we're looking forward to having that all upgraded. But I hope you notice there's a shine on this floor. That as an addition was built on, it makes it even longer. So because we need to have children move throughout the space, then when we do our additions this time, we're going up. I want to draw your attention to the ceiling tiles up here. They're replaced at least twice a year, and it has to do with the roofs on the roof. Now I know some people say, but you did some roofs at the last project. Indeed, you're correct. When we walk through the girls' locker room, the roofs above the girls' and the boys' locker room have been replaced. The roofs over at West Chazy were replaced. The ones over at Cumberland Head were replaced. But the majority of this building has not, since it was originally built. That means that these roofs have done us fairly well for the number of years that they have been up. And it's no wonder that there is a need to repair them. Even when you buy new roofs, the warranties are usually 20 years, we're talking 40 years now. So we need to work on this. We will see as we walk down, there's a certain place that Kevin will draw your attention to the ceiling, and you will see that where they stopped putting the tile up because it was just coming down. Instead, they put an egg carton type?
Egg crate, yeah, they call it.
Yeah, egg crate, and they'll be able to show that to you. And this is the water softener that was put in that's not used. Let me explain to you why. The water's hard. Anyone who lives around here knows we have hard water, so they put a softener in. However, when they put the softener in, they put it in so that the water would go through the softener and then go back through the tank and would come out hard. So we need to fix this. It needs to be fixed so it's working properly. Kevin, do you want to add any technical? information on that?
No, just that them original tanks, they're starting to rot. You look at them, the rust is coming right through them.
So your water's going through the well?
Yes.
The architects that we are working with have engineers on their staff, and they have commented how impressed they are by our maintenance and our custodial staff in spite of such aging facilities taken so good care of. Tonight. I want to show you our computer area. Again, it is a small space, as you can see. And if you have two people who are moving around, this is what has to happen. Someone has to move over to the side in order for somebody to be able to get through. And of course, we're talking about all our students in our school must take a personal computer course in order to graduate. It's a graduation requirement. So they have economically used the room as best they can, but as you can see, it's very difficult for the teacher to be able to monitor as well as it could be configured if there was more and better space.
This is the computer lab for the school?
This is one of them.
Oh, there's just one. There
The
are
other
other.
one's just another classroom over on the other side.
Yes. We're just starting to get our technology on board here. Anybody want to step around and look at anything, please feel free. Doors. We don't let any of our space go to waste. Most classrooms are occupied by at least 2 teachers. And you might say to yourself, oh my goodness, what difference does that make? Well, having been a former science teacher, I will say that as you are getting ready, you have 3 minutes in between classes, you're standing there waiting for the children to get out of that class, you've got your bags of equipment ready to set up your experiments and ready to dash into the room and in 3 minutes set that room up for your class. Not always the best of situations, because sometimes students want to talk to you when they come into the class, but you're very intent upon getting your class ready so you can start on time.
This is just our other computer. This is just our other computer room if you'd like to see it, which pretty much as cramped as the other one.
This is used by the science class in different groups. This is a little bit more spacious, but you wouldn't have a regular class in here. Usually it's groups that are working on special projects, science projects, social studies projects, so on and so forth. 2 or 3 teachers share space. We don't have any space for somebody to stay and work during their prep period, and we do have department chairs who have responsibilities for curriculum and for other department duties that they need space, and they also need a telephone to get some things done. So in this particular room, we have 6 people. And as you see, just take a peek in. They didn't leave any space to be wasted.
6 teachers, 6 department heads plus a secretary.
Oh, this is, each of the department heads.
Yeah. And every time it rained, they'd end up on the floor.
Oh yes, 8 times.
Well, now we just put a bucket underneath it when it rains.
Let's see, we have, I'd say, maybe 70 teachers who need to get in and out of here during their lunchtime to eat. Because you can't use the classrooms because the classrooms are filled with children. So where we have the, they call middle school university. As you may recall, there was a proposition that was up that bought the piece of property and building across the street. We used that to put our 6th grade classes in. We knew at the time it was being purchased that it was to be just a short-term solution. Maybe if you just peek around there, you might be able to see it. Now, in order for our children to come in for lunch, to come in for library, to come in for phys ed, to come in for home and careers, to come in for technology, they need to come back and forth across that street. Yes, we're very pleased it's not a very active and busy street, but still, it's not the best of situations. We do have a crossing guard, however, and he does take great care with them. But you and I know that this is the North Country and probably not the best of situations for children. So what we're looking at doing is we're looking to take the main office, which is my office, moving me out there, along with Mr. Sapp, our business person, and taking the children and bringing them back here, building them up on the second roof of this middle school wing. Some of you come into this room, you probably say, deja vu. I remember being in a classroom very similar to this. In one of the issues that we sent out in the news notes, you saw one of the ends of a table had the top taken off of it. You can see right here where it was replaced. Obviously, we don't leave our building in disarray, but whenever you have to take care of those things, it takes away from other things that need to be done. Now you say, well, this is a pretty good classroom, and indeed, it has its function and use. However, the state has now said that all children must take a science regents, as a matter of fact, 2, prior to them graduating. And so that means that when we had only 43% of our class graduating with a regents diploma, which we have presently, we are now looking at a classroom that's going to have to hold much greater number of children in order to successfully complete the sequences necessary to get a diploma in New York State. Also, in our new additions, we will not create situations such as this where this room can only be used for the purpose that it was originally created. Our new space will be very flexible, which will allow us to use it in many different ways in the future. So, given its age, I think it looks a pretty good room, but it really doesn't, it is not conducive to what we need to do in order to prepare our children for the future. Improve the lighting. If you look at this lighting, and then I'll show you, Kevin, does it use the master lock on the door?
I think there might be switches.
No, I meant classroom.
Oh, no.
Are these new locks? I got it. All right, now you saw that light. Now you see this light. This is a new wing. This is a point of comparison. And the other room, the other lighting. The room we were last in was really nice because we had the light from the outside. The sun was out and bright and it was nice. This is just a point of comparison. This is our new wing. Pay attention to the different level of lighting that we have here, even with the nice open windows that we see over on the other side of this library. This library is the heartbeat of this district, this building. When you come in here, there's as many as 3 classrooms, all busy, working at this is our only internet area. What you saw before was our for keyboarding. This is the only access that children have to internet. They use it for their research. They have, of course, their other resources to use within the library. But if you can imagine 3 different classes. When I want to get up and close and personal with the children, I just come here. And they're right next to you because there's just so much space. But they're all involved and everybody makes the best of what we have here. I'm very proud of that. We're looking for brighter times for ourselves. Cheerio. And we're going to expand it just a little bit more so that we can use our space a little bit better. We're going to get rid of these tables and use kind of like the mall type use of the space for when people eat, because they're able to cram more people in. Well, that's what we're going to look to do. It Again, we're looking for big spaces so that in the future, if we need to change for whatever reason, we can. Because there's a lot of flexible furniture out there that can make a room from one type of instructional setting to another. Middle school, high school combined is about 11 to 1,200. It's not counting our elementary on the other side. This is our high tech. This is where our T1 lines are that connect us into the internet, and all of our telephone wires, which they joyously share with the custodial staff. For those who came late, I just wanted to say again, my name is Sandra Urbach, and I'm the superintendent of schools, and I'm so pleased you're here tonight. I'm going to go through a slideshow with you, and then after I finish that, as I said, Ms. Vior is going to give some additional information from Veneer Carr and Associates, who are our architects in this project. Time is now. And why now? Aging and decaying buildings in need of repair and renovation. It is a 40-year-old building. And State Ed is aware of the fact that throughout New York State, the buildings are aging. That's why they passed, the legislature passed the opportunity for schools to get 10 extra % on their building aid for renovations and additions. As I mentioned to you on the tour, we have some new set of guidelines from state education. They're requiring that all of our students who graduate must pass 5 new regions. The junior class is the first that must pass the English Language Arts test exam, Regents exam, in order to graduate. The class that follows it must pass the new Math 1A test. Behind that is the class that must pass the Regents in U.S. history, and after that, the social studies people must pass the global history, which used to be global studies. So we then have the science requirement that follows up and ends the sequence of required test introduction. Some people say, well, it doesn't matter because people will just drop out and get their GED. Well, the state thought about that, and that's why they're going to do away with the GED. So that option, in order to get your diploma, is going to be phased out. Students have only one way now to get through and get a diploma, and that is through meeting the new standards that the state requires. As I mentioned before, according to the rules and regulations that we follow, students who do not pass a Regents exam or any state required exam must be provided remediation. In saying that they want us to meet these new standards, it is not an instruction as it used to be. Those who took the Regents exam prior to this know a group of exams where you sat, you studied the material, you memorized it really well, you got it all in your head, you rushed into the exam room, you put it down as fast as you could and as well as you could, and you went, phew, and it was over. Well, not so with the new exams. The English Language Arts exams, you must sit for 2 days for it, and it has different components. It has a reading component, it has a component in which you must listen and be able to gather information from that listening activity and complete a task. And it has a critical thinking piece that you must complete. This is not business as usual. Also, another part of that is that the state is very concerned that we prepare our students for the world of work. The world of work now requires its employees to be able to work as a team for a solution. As a matter of fact, futurists have given us a lot of information telling us that we will expect our students to be going into a world of work that will be mostly a service-providing type activity. That means that our students must be able to interact and work with other people if they're going to be able to be gainfully employed. Finally, there isn't any position out there, even if we're talking about working in a supermarket or any other type of work environment that doesn't demand some type of technological skill. This is only going to get greater as time passes. We need to be fair to our students and have them ready for that experience. The other reason that we're saying why now, why do such a large project right now, is that this is the best financial time for us to do it. This all started with the technology initiative over 2 years ago, when they realized where things were going and what our needs were going to be. I don't know if any of you live in older houses, but if you were going to put some new equipment in your house, sometimes you need to rewire because the wiring that you initially had doesn't support the addition of the new equipment, or utilities does not provide you the opportunity to use certain required power needs. Some of the things that you can buy now need three-prong types of outlets, and I don't know if any of you live in houses where you had to get all of your outlets changed so you could be able to support that kind of electricity need. Our architectural firm was selected. Committees were formed. Those committees met. They developed what was needed. They also developed what they wanted. And then they met with the architectural firm representatives. Proposals were made. We looked at what we wanted and saw that we couldn't have all of that. So then we had to focus on what we felt we absolutely had to have. The groups that met were 10. And each of those groups were made up of community members, teachers, parents, administrators, everyone who has something to do with what goes on in this school, and particularly those who have interests or feel they have expertise in those areas. For instance, you wouldn't want someone to come in and create a kitchen for you without asking you what you need in your kitchen. You wouldn't ask someone to come in and remodel your bathroom without you even being consulted about what your needs are in that bathroom. So here are the numbers. I told you about the 10% additional building aid. Right now, each school has two types of building aid. They have a select building aid and they have a building aid. The building aid is less than the select aid. Our building aid is 60%. What they do is, most people would select the building aid that gives you more money on the dollar that you have to spend for your building project. So you can look at what those numbers are if we use the 75% alone, and when we use the 85%.
You said maybe because the grant we get, that's not a goal. So
Right.
the district only is paying as a local share. They don't have to repay any of that other cost.
That is correct. Thank you for that clarification. That's absolutely correct. So that means that at every construction dollar you pay, you're paying 15 cents of that dollar. State aid gives you the rest. And we're at a good time for interest rates. Better than some of our interest rates in the past. I also want to talk about aidability.
What is the interest rate?
Well, we're looking at perhaps right now approximately 2% less than the last time that we went out. Now, what-
5 to 5.5% is what's being forecasted now.
That you're gonna pay now?
Excuse me, for this project.
You're paying fines right now?
No.
they're anticipating.
The previous project was in the neighborhood of 7.
Oh,
This will be in the neighborhood of 5.
For you who don't know, that's Mr. Stafford, he's our business administrator. I also want to talk about
How
aidability.
long a time are you gonna pay off that?
That's another good question. I'm going to give you another slide and then I
Okay,
want to
I'll
answer
wait.
that. Let's hold that question there, don't forget it, because it's, I think, one of the good aspects of how we planned this with our financial. We do have financial advisors. Those people's occupation is to do exactly this, give us good advice on how we deal with the money part. So I want to talk about aidability. When we submit our plans to state ed, they say, we will aid for this, 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 this. If you decide that you need something else that isn't aidable, then that aid that you're granted has to be spread out a little bit more. So let me explain what that might mean. Instead of, let's say you have a great tomato, thick tomato sauce. You put it on your spaghettis, right? But you're told you're going to have some people come in. So you put in some water into the spaghetti sauce, and you water it down, so it's not that nice thick piece that spaghetti sauce that you thought you were going to have. Well, that's what you can do sometimes when you say, oh, it's 85% aidable. Well, it would be if everything was aidable. But if you're not really careful, you could start watering that down, and now your project, instead of being 85% aidable, is 83% aidable, is 79% aidable. So we're trying very carefully to make sure that we keep that 85% and keep it at that margin that we feel that we have in front of us at this time. We are also retiring the debt. Okay. Right now, in the budget that we presently have for the 1999-2000, we have 89 cents of that goes towards our debt. The projects that you've done before and the buses that we have been able to purchase for the district. So now we're looking at this new project, and now we're looking at 72 cents per $1,000 assessed. That means that in what we have now, which is 89 cents budgeted, we're going to slide in, replace the 72 cents. Let me try to put that another way. You've worked hard, you've paid off your mortgage on your house. Just so happy. And now you're looking around the house and saying, you know, for it to stay valuable, I think I'm going to need to do some work on it. So you do a home improvement mortgage, and you just slide that into your budget where you before had your money that you were spending out to pay your mortgage. So that's what we're talking about. Well, it would be unrealistic to say to you that we're going to build additional space and not have that have a cost. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. To maintain the space, we're talking about $100,000. Materials and supplies to take care of that space, about $7,000. The inspections, you got to, by law, do fire and build and bleachers and building inspections. Your utilities and insurance. So what does this mean? This means about 40 cents per thousand on the tax rate. All right, so let's look at the numbers. A new debt, 72 cents. Add to that the operational cost, 40 cents. Total cost, $1.12. The retired debt service, remember that 89 cents? I'm going to subtract that out. Now, the new net cost, 23 cents per thousand.
How do you get 23%?
That means the home assessed at 80,000, therefore would see an estimated annual increase of $18.40 in property taxes.
I still don't see how you get 23%.
I'm sorry?
How do you get the 23% per thousand?
I have this machine running
You
my
said
head.
the cost is 23% per thousand?
Increase.
Okay, you're telling me also that 89, right?
No, we're taking that out because we're retiring that debt. We're taking that out.
Show that screen again.
Yep.
Well, we got, you're showing 72 and 40 cents at $1.12.
Let's go back. Wait a minute, I have to go through this first, and then I'll go back. Technology is great when it's working for you. Now, we have 72 and... Well, you can't see that if I do that, I'm sorry. We have... I have a little mark here. That's 72 cents. This is the new debt service. The 40 cents that we mentioned, as I showed you, increase in operational,
So it's $1.12.
$1.12. Now, presently we're paying out 89 cents, but we're going to pay it off. It's gone.
Then it's zero. And then it becomes $1.12. Cost of doing it.
Well, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I say that 23 cents is very confusing. You shouldn't represent like that. You should put it
Well-
in total cost, it's $1.12.
I understand that, but already in our present budget, we do have 89 cents there.
But it almost shows there it's only going to cost us 23% per thousand.
23% more than it presently does.
That's right.
It presently
But
does.
it, actually, it almost shows that this newer thing is only going to cost 23% per thousand.
This is the increase.
That's the increase, that's right. So you should show a total of $1.12. I think you should do it that way.
Okay.
I think it's you're playing with figures and make it confusing.
Well, we're trying to make it simple. We've been working on these slides a little bit, so if you think that that's confusing, that was not our intent.
No, but I think we got to show, the debt we're retiring is done. We don't have none more. Now we're creating a new one, we should show what the new one costs.
Okay. Well,
That's my
then,
view.
let's get down to
We
the
retired
basics.
one, let's show what the new one costs.
Let's
And I
talk about
understand
that.
it's 23 cents, but I don't think it's fair to show it that way.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more, because it's a really important issue, and I want to be sure that we're all thinking about it and looking at it the same way. You're right. If you want to look at it that way, you certainly can. But let me ask you to look at it yet another way. We have a debt that we received aid on, okay? We're retiring that early, so we're going to still get some aid. Okay? Now, that money is going to go against the cost of the new project. Okay? Now, we also, we're giving you the worst scenario. Now, also add to that, when we pass a bond, we're going to go right out and borrow some of that money. We're going to put it in the bank, and we're going to start to collect interest. The law allows us to do that, as long as you do not earn more than the cost to the local share. You can't do that. But they will let you put it against that cost. So we're going to get some after that aid is gone, after that debt is gone, and we're going to get some interest money. That is going to work to help that financial situation. Also, as you were walking along, you notice that we have, as I mentioned, we have some lighting issues, we have some other issues too. But look, we'll start with lighting. I don't know how many of you have any old equipment that you run. I had an old refrigerator. And when I was looking for a new refrigerator, I looked for that energy saving stuff. And I said, well, they say I'm going to save money. And I do have a science background, but I'm not so sure I believe it. So I did check the utility bill after I put in my new refrigerator. And indeed, it was correct. I did save some money on that. Now, I don't know exactly how much money that is going to mean because we're also adding more electricity elsewhere in this new addition, okay? But I do know that I am going to save some money because I am putting in things that don't use the same amount of electricity, just like that electricity I showed to you at the stage. So that's another potential savings. Also, the numbers we cited here are based on a 15-year payback as opposed to a 20-year payback. If we were looking at a 20-year payback, it would be a little less. But we wanted to put the numbers out, as I said, a worst-case scenario, so no one could come back later and say, you know, you didn't give us a straight scope here.
Excuse me. You see, this figure, this is not right. I don't know what the gentleman said, but you're replacing 72 from the 89. There's a difference of 17. See, you subtracted 89 from that cost of 12. You should deduct only 17 cents. And we should have a total, instead of 23 cents per thousand, we're going to end up with 96 cents per thousand. If you look at it the other way, we had 89 from before. And then we could add the 40, which is a new operation cost. But we have there. So you add the 89 plus the 40 to another figure. Then we have a new one, which is 72 plus 40. You add that and you subtract the original from that, and you see around 96, not 42 cents.
Did you understand what we said?
Okay, the original cost, let's say the one that we didn't finish, it's going to be terminated.
That
It's
one we
89
got.
cents. Number two
89.
show, 89 cents.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
That's
We
right.
took it away.
We're going to replace it with 72 cents.
That's what we put up at the top.
Exactly. So 72 from the 89, it's only 17.
Well, what we did was we added that new operational cost to that special two, and then subtracted the 89.
You can't do that.
Is the operational cost from the
You
debt
cannot do
service?
that.
Wow.
It doesn't make sense.
Is that going to be a debt service, the operational cost?
You see, you cannot, you see, we are replacing 72, we are eliminating 89 and we're replacing 72. Then you have the 72 and you have the 40, it's 112. That's what we're going to end up paying. Why would you want to deduct the 89?
Because in our original budget, our budget that we have now,
Yeah.
we have budgeted 89 cents. What we're trying to do is compare it to what we have now. All right? I understand what you're saying. It's a different way of going about it because we will retire that debt, that 89 cents. We're not saying,
If you retire the 89, you
Yeah.
have 72 and 40, it's 112.
yes,
You cannot deduct it again. I mean, whoever made that, it's not.
You have a negative,
You can't put it in the figures.
you have a negative, you have a negative number there. A negative plus a positive. I mean, you have a negative in terms of the difference between the new debt service and the retired debt
We eliminate
service.
the 89. Okay, let's eliminate the 89 because we don't have it anymore. The new one is 72, am I right?
Correct.
And we're having 40 cents also. So that's the total 112, am I right? Why would you deduct again 89?
this is a point of comparison. This is only a point of comparison. Right now in our budget, we pay 89 cents. And we're saying to you, how will this be different when we have a new project, when we have at $1.12? How will it be different in terms of the cost difference from what you're paying now, which is the 89 cents, to what you will be paying later, which is the $1.12? So what we're saying to you, the difference between those two
Oh, I
will
see,
be
okay.
23 cents.
Well, but we have paid
Right,
112.
The 23
The
is
23
just
just, I think, is very deceiving. Okay.
That's what that
In
is.
that case. Okay.
So all we're
Okay,
trying to do is
that's
a
fine.
point of comparison for you. This is what you pay now, you pay 89 cents, okay? When that, and the new project is $1.12, you got that right. And what we're trying to say is, how different will that be in terms of your tax bill when this goes in place compared to what the tax bill now is? That difference is 23 cents. Okay, but as I also said, I wanted to put in perspective for you that we're using numbers that have a 15-year payback. And why on earth would we say 15 years when we could have a payback in 20? Well, our initial financial view of that is that we could perhaps save you as much as $1 million in interest rates. So that's the reason why we're going with these numbers. We could make it less if we put it in more years.
So in other
Thank you
words,
for asking
if
that question. I really
this
appreciate it.
project doesn't go through, my tax rate will go down to 89 cents per thousand.
No, it stays where it is.
No, because it just will be retired, it's 89 cents being retired.
No, when we retire the debt, you're absolutely right.
This is the last time it's in the budget.
You're right. Well, we'll still, not totally. Well, no, yes, it will. Yes, it
So
will.
this is
Well, you
going
gotta
to be retired no
retire it.
matter what?
You have to retire your debt.
Hey,
A portion of it.
I'm retired. Yeah.
Not our whole debt service
Well, okay, but 89 cents is going to be retired.
right now, yes. That will
As
be
of this
retired.
budget here.
As of the end of the 2000,
Well, we're not going to pay on the other one before that, too?
No.
no.
First
It's
2
not
years,
even-
you won't make a borrowing of $30 million all in 1 year because the construction won't even start
To
for
2000.
summer of next year. And the other thing is,
You're gonna be,
because you have the money in the
borrowing
bank, you're
before you
earning,
even get the construction.
You put money in the bank, and you're going to get interest like Mr. Sabat is indicating. We can do that to pay against the local share. We're giving you none of those things existing, but we know they do exist. Because we don't want anyone later on to say, well, he didn't really tell us that, he didn't really tell us this. We're trying to make it as clear as we possibly
I still think you should say the cost of this new project is $1.12 and forget all the rest. Forget all
Look at
that
it
rest.
that way.
That's the cost of it, and that's what I'm gonna have to pay on my taxes for 1,000, and I think this is what it should be put out, $1.12.
Okay,
That's why I don't feel it, I'm not anybody else here.
that's fine.
I like it that way, so I don't have to go through all the pencil pushing and all the arithmetic. And I know just what that's gonna add on to my taxes.
But it's not going to
It's not
add,
gonna, okay, but I'm saying if we don't do this, it's adding on. This is on condition this goes through. If this doesn't go through, it doesn't cost me $1.12. So you gotta look at it. I'm not here trying to talk against this project, but I say you gotta show it right. Show it the way it should be. It's costing us $1.12. Your best estimate. Don't show us anything else.
It's more attractive to
I think, this is what.
really, we're trying to show a point of comparison.
Flexible thinking, folks. I mean, if you want your kids to have flexible thinking, do that.
I guess, I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, think
I also
that's
want to
the way
tell you another piece
My
about...
feeling it should be presented that way.
Okay.
But that's just my own feeling, because I like it, so you understand it. Don't get it confused. It's very simple.
I also want to tell you something
It's
about
gonna cost me
certain...
$1.12 per thousand for this project. But the other one is gonna be zero after this year or 2 years.
Correct, so your taxes will go down.
89 cents, yeah, they're not gonna,
But
they're,
they go, and since they go down 89 cents, the new project will cost you
$1.12.
$1.12. But you will only be paying 23 cents more
yeah, but the thing cost me $1.12.
than you are now.
That's what it cost me.
you're right.
This new project cost me $1.12. And I don't care how you play around with it, it still costs me.
I don't want to play with the numbers.
No.
That's not my intent. I want these...
I understand what you're trying to do.
If you go down and you come back up, and this is where you're going to come up above that. And
I
we've tried like a
understand what
number
you're
of
trying to do
slides
there,
to present...
But I don't like to have it presented that way. That's, I think that's my own feeling, but I'm not there.
I appreciate that.
The 72 cents, that is going to pay for the 30.5 million borrow, architect fees,
Everything.
everything, interest, everything.
The rest is not good.
You must have got a very bad deal on that 89 cent debt. I don't remember borrowing for 30,000 before.
Well, you also.
Well, your interest rates were higher, you're retiring debt quicker.
You did it in a shorter time period.
You know, 6 million was the last debt for 7 years.
And you got to remember the 10% has an enormous impact on your local share.
Well, that 10% is only going to pay the architect fee.
Well, it's a net reduction to the local share of approximately 40%.
Well, I'm thinking that this could have been done a lot less expensive on a one-story bed. I feel that you're going to spend for the second story, the elevators, the extra staircases you're going to have, that's going to cost about $1.5 million or more dollars. You can buy a lot of cement, a lot of property for that kind of money.
We
That
project
saves
this cost.
10% on architectural fees.
I don't agree with saving money.
I mean, we're stuck with, we don't like the project. We voted yes or voted no. I don't like this project. I think it's very expensive. Build that second story. That'll cost about $700,000 for the steel work alone. That's my guesstimate.
We
The
put this
elevators
in
are
because
close
we
to
wanted
$400,000.
to be clear about that there will be some additional operational costs. That's why we put that piece in there for you.
How are bids coming in according to this projected bids? Are they coming in to the goals or have you allowed an outlet?
We allow contingencies for inflation. We're actually entering into a very volatile construction period over the next 3 years. And so we try to allow for that.
Okay. Major issues addressed by the capital project. We're going to add technology. We're going to expand our library. We're going to expand the gymnasium. We're going to create a middle school concept. Take the children from across the street, bring them back into the school. We're going to have some additional classrooms for our expanding population and also the additional program requirements that I mentioned. Renovation and preservation of the existing facilities, and that's really a big piece of this. I mean, it is a difficult thing to talk about, to describe, to look at. It's not big, it's not flashy. I'm not expecting to get anybody persuaded for this project by going, wow, look at those lights, right? They're the best lights you've ever seen in the whole wide world. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to get excited. Oh, we gotta have that. Or when you look at our heating and ventilation difficulties, you know, I'm not going to, you know, kick the old univent and say, wow, isn't that a good little univent? I mean, people are not going to get excited about that. But basically, this is an old building. You need to take care of it. And I do want to show you, when you look at this building, this technology room, which was meant for another time in our lives, not now. The library where you were in, this was the picture that I spoke about earlier that has been repaired. I have seen those. We do have a roof that leaks. We'll talk a little bit about roofs in a few minutes. We have a main building elementary that we need to get the technology in here. We do need some classrooms because we do have an increase in our population. We need expanded library. We need some gym space. Right now, we have the middle school and the high school and the elementary school all vying for the same space. It makes it awfully hard to create an elementary school in and of itself when you have middle schoolers and high schoolers in the same area. The elementary would have its own cafeteria. The all-purpose room that it has now is used for gym space. And we're talking about the infrastructure, electrical, air quality, the heating. Those are the things. It's a big area. It's a big ticket. Our middle school, the technology. Putting our children who are middle school age close together with our 6th and 7th graders upstairs in their nests, while our 8th graders who will be moving into the high school world underneath them. Expanded library, improved physical education stations, cafeteria, and the improved infrastructure. Another thing in the standards is that all the standards are connected to reading and writing. And so that's why you'll see in each of these additions that we're asking for in renovation, it's an increase in our library space. Because in order to meet those standards, the children need to have access to the materials that they need in order to build the skills.
Excuse me, in addition, you mentioned additional technology, we talking about new computers, we talking about the physical development. Which one is it?
We're talking about both. We're talking about creating the environment where we can plug the machines in. And also we're talking about putting machines in. But we're not talking about going out and giving everybody a computer. We're talking about having in a classroom at least have one computer for the teacher to use a teaching station and one for the children, at least one computer in each classroom. For the classroom teacher to get more computers, they have to show that they have a need and that how they're going to use it in their instruction. We also have some computer labs where classrooms can go there. Right now, that's the most efficient way of doing it. Also doing it in this manner, we're going to wait for prices to get better because, as you know, the computer prices are going down, down, down. So we're looking to just give us some basics to work with, and then as prices get better, go out and get ourselves some more. In our high school, we're not going to have many additional rooms because we don't have the increase there. What we do have is a number of programs. And because the additional number of children, if 43% of your population is getting Regents now, and now you must make sure 100% is getting it, children are going to be taking courses that they didn't take before. Courses that they were able to take before are going to no longer be acceptable in terms of the state's requirements. When I talk about the expanded library, we're talking about the same library used by both the middle school and the high school, same cafeteria. All of these, the elementary, the middle school, and the high school will use the expanded physical education space. And again, the infrastructure. Over in West Chazy, our oldest building that is part of our district, needs to have its fair share of technology. We have about 109, 110 children up there. They need to have improved infrastructure. For instance, it's an old building, so it has those high ceilings. And I don't know if you've ever been in a house like that, but when you try to move the furniture around, it makes a lot of noise. So what we're trying to do is we're going to soundproof the walls a little bit to cut down on that noise, make it a better instructional environment. Perimeter fence, and over at Cumberland Head, there are additions to technology, classrooms, expanding their library and media center, gym improvement. This is just a floor. Again, the infrastructure. The two elements, the two satellite elementary schools just go to fifth grade or sixth grade. Right now, the West Chazy is at fourth. Next year will go up to fifth, and it is K5. K5, K5, K5.
So 6 is part of the middle school.
6, 7, 8. So we're going to have 6 and 7s upstairs all by themselves. Bus garage, they need to have some more space. First of all, improve their infrastructure and expand their service area. And athletic facilities. There are lots of things that could be improved, but we went for the ones that really needed the work. Again, we're giving ourselves more workstations by expanding our gymnasium. We're going to improve our soccer field, and we're going to have an all-weather track surface. So when you look at this, obviously most of the work is being done in this building. That's why we've had it here, and that's why we tore it here. You see the technology piece. This is Cumberland Head. The Dodge Library is part of this district, and we are responsible for it. So we put that together with West Chazy, which is about 1.8%. The annex here, that's across the street, and the bus garage. Here's the bottom line. Our current facilities, the cost of that, to renovate, to bring it up to where it should be. Technology, and this is the addition. We're going to give our children the technology. They need to be competitive. I like to tell a story about when I was in Middleburg. Our high school valedictorian went off to Clarkson University. We had a frantic call from her, and she said, I have to email my professor my homework. That's the only way he'll accept it. I don't know how to email. I never was on the internet. I don't know anything about this. So we had somebody out there from school go over and teach her what she needed to know, and she borrowed a computer from one of the teachers. Middle schoolers would have their nests, 6th and 7th together. Main building elementary wouldn't have to be sharing.
What do you do a fence off of SUV?
Sorry?
SUV, like a fence.
We're going to put the perimeter fence
Around
around
the
it.
ball field like that?
Make it safer.
They won't go down the main.
That's right, that's what we're worried about. As you can see, we're trying to alleviate some of the overcrowding we have. Once you get all the electrical materials in, then you could, if you wanted to, put in a security system, it would be less expensive. Right now, we just don't have the capacity to take care of something like that. So in order to do something, we would have to make sure that we could support it in terms of the electrical capabilities. So we're not talking about a lot of flash. We're not talking about, big, sprawling Warner Brothers Presents. We're talking about taking care of a building and, fixing it up. And not just trying to continue to put little Band-Aids on it. Because little Band-Aids eventually don't work anymore, and you've got to take care of it. And I guess my concern is that if we don't take care of it now, and for some reason we lose the 10%, or we lose the select aid, which under Governor Pataki's proposal, we'd go back to 60%. Then, when we have to, in a situation where we have no choice, go out and borrow that money, we're not going to have a local share that's as attractive. The other thing about state aid is for certain things that you get aid for, you have to spend money to get money. So that if we don't do any building projects, we don't replace that, then the reality is we don't get any money back in for the state aid, because if you don't spend it, you don't get it. That's the way it works.
And once this project is approved, how long will it take to finish this project?
It's a very good question. Mrs. Fiore, do you want to speak to that? Because this is really her section.
At this point, we're anticipating that we may be able to start construction late summer next year, maybe, with a lot of questions as far as the time at the state education department for review. The actual construction process will likely take up to 2 years. In part because obviously we have to be able to maintain school activities, we've got to be able to student state, we've got to be able to maintain facilities. So the idea is, and in this building in particular, we build the additions, shift the students into the additions, then you can get into the reconstruction. The realities are that, you have a very short window of time when students aren't in the building that you can really go in and do wholesale changes. So we have to be real sensitive to that. So, we're looking at an overall timeline from now until we close the books of probably 3 years. It could easily be that long. There's a lot of variables that would affect that.
In that time, there's a chance of a cost overrun in this project?
Well, the question is there a chance of a cost overrun given that prolonged schedule? And we're going to talk about the numbers a little bit more, but we have included in the project budgets a 10% contingency line, which in part is designated for construction inflation. We've had pretty good inflation rates in this neck of the woods over the last, say, 5 years, but the school market is just blown wide open. The quicker we can get to market, the better we're going to be, obviously, to capture some of that. But at this point, it's very, very hard to predict. So we feel very comfortable that we have the project adequately budgeted, and obviously we need to track that very closely with the design. Certainly with a project of this magnitude, you have a lot more flexibility, obviously, in your budget than you would if you were doing, say, $1 million project. But we have to be conscious of that through the whole process.
So you think this is already included in this package?
Yeah, as a budget line item, that contingency along the team.
Is the contractors, when you send those for bid, are those the local contractor also bidding on this contract? Or not?
The school is regulated essentially as a municipality would be in New York State, so they fall under the municipal law for public bidding. And basically, as that law stands right now, on any project, certainly of this magnitude, but I think it's in excess of 50,000 aggregate amount now, the school has to go to competitive market, public advertised bidding on a minimum of 3 contracts, but that really translates more typically into for a general contract, mechanical, plumbing, and electrical. Those being the minimum packages, so to speak. There may be some need or want as we start to analyze the market to break those down further and or possibly put 4 contractors at West Shady and 4 here and other places. We'll analyze that as we get closer. The school district is essentially bound by the low bid gets the project, and this is a very hotly debated, legislative, legal battle that goes on annually in New York State. But basically, the lowest qualified bidder receives the contract award from the school. Now, one of the things that we've been very successful in doing is obviously local contractors are very important to school projects and its opportunities in your community, is trying to coordinate the dissemination of information for those people as potentially being subcontractors to, say, a larger general prime contractor. Or, for example, if there's 15 local roofing companies, who could bid the roofs separately, we may look at bidding multiple packages. There's pretty stringent requirements on the contracts that the school awards. They have to be bonded, so there's some. It's a little bit more complex, and there's certainly, it's a very regulated approach, but there are some things that we can do to encourage, local participation within those rules.
The new bidders, and the new firm is still responsible to make sure that the new bidder sticks to the specification of the plan.
Yes, we're responsible for quality control, quality, ultimately, yes.
Now, there's this, they're talking paying it off for 15 years. Is everything that we're doing gonna take it for the next 15 years, fairly good without just maybe some regular maintenance?
Well,
As far as additions, everything is just gonna,
Mr. Urbach, yeah, Mr. Urbach can talk about the capacity or the magnitude of the spaces in terms of the materials and the quality of the materials, et cetera. Certainly that's what our goal is. The fact is, our goal is to provide a design that's been budgeted that way and a construction that's going to last you and endure the use just as this facility has. I mean, it's 40 years old. 30 million is a huge amount of money, but it's served you pretty well over 40 years. You know, some of the areas, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, I think, you know, things like roofs. You know, you've got a 40-year-old roof on most of this building. I cannot stand here and tell you that any roof that we put on in the year 2001 is going to still be there in 40 years.
what I was thinking is, we're talking about 15 years to pay this off, but you see that this is the last upgrade we did. This is going to take care of everything we need for the next 15 years, pretty much. I mean, you're going to do the roofs, so they're going to last that long.
Mm-hmm.
And
We know
you're
that we
going to
need-
repair all the problems with the structure that's present here. And do you see it as anything could happen that we would have to, say, in 10 years, go to some more project, or do you feel that
What we're going
you've
at.
looked over everything enough to be quite sure that this can take us through 15 years without going back for any major?
That's our intent. Our intent is to do that. That's why we took, so many people were so involved in this process. Our intent is to do it while we have a good financial situation to do it and do it right and get everything done. And also, in terms of the space, remember as we were going on the tour, I said we're going to make this space flexible. So no matter what our needs are in the future, we're going to be able to change that around with furniture, as opposed to creating a space that can only be used for this or be used for that. And that's very important. Yes.
So you will meet our enrollment for the next 15 years?
Well, what we did is we did a projection for the next 10 years. As we use the standard procedure, it's called cohort survival. It's a very conservative estimate of the population. The increases that we're projecting include the preschool, bringing them in, getting them ready for entering school so that they can get through the standards. We have special education students who are presently served in other schools. The state has mandated that BCS close their facility and to move the children into school settings. We're getting some extra aid by building some space for them in here that we can rent to them and get some money back from them. So it becomes a source of revenue for us. And I would say that over the years, we're going to have our population change in terms of its size. However, if you have enough space, it just means redesignating how the space is used. And that's our anticipation. This project to me means a lot because I want to see this all upgraded, space that we need, and that's that. I don't want to come back in 5 or 10 years. I don't want to do
You
that.
feel 15 years and you'll still go.
I'm feeling right now that we have planned, given the numbers that we have, appropriately. We've really tried to be very
In
forward-looking.
West Easy in 15 more years?
I'm sorry?
West Easy School is still in the picture for the next 15 years?
I don't know. That I have no idea. I couldn't even guess what that would be. I know that it is a very valuable neighborhood school, much
Yeah,
loved.
I hate to add on here to close out. That's what I looked at.
That's
I
good.
hate
You know,
to see
because
that
there were mumblings out there that was
Well, I
our
know,
intent.
2 years back, they were gonna close it, and I can't see closing it.
Well, that's not our intent. But that, because there were so many rooms that were building up here, everybody thought, oh, that's what they're gonna do, that's what they're about. No, that's not our intent. We wouldn't go over and spend all the money that we're gonna invest in that building if that was our intent.
Well, that's what I was asking, I mean, if you're gonna keep it open for West
I
Easy.
don't know if it'll be open 10 years from now. I mean, I can't look in the crystal ball.
But you don't have any date where you're gonna close it in?
There has been discussion about it. I know there's been discussion about it because I got such a strong reaction when I was over in West JP because they thought, because they heard that we're putting the classrooms up here, that that's what was going to happen.
This project was not designed to close West Chase.
No, that's what I'm asking, no, you don't,
And that's kind of the bottom line
you
question.
don't have
you're
no,
asking, so
no
it's
date
not-
where this won't be used anymore.
Nope, that's not the intent.
Excuse me, can I ask one more question?
Sure.
The committee, they oversee the architecture of their job.
Very good question. We have a superintendent of buildings and grounds. We have Mr. Staff, our business administrator, and myself as the superintendent that will be overseeing all that is done. Besides which, there will be reports given on a general basis to the Board of Education, letting them know where we're at. That way, when the architect and the construction management people leave, then we will have our person who is in charge of the buildings and grounds know everything and anything that happened to this place. He's also going to take pictures of everything so that we have a permanent record to refer back to. So we're going to be working very closely with our architects and construction management people every step of the way. Because this is, a very big project, a very big commitment of public funds. And we want to make sure everyone, the architects, the board, Mr. Satt, myself, everyone is part of this for us to get the best quality for the money that we're investing.
This project is taking 2 years.
Yes.
Is the mode of payment, how is it going to be made? Meaning, is those rates going to be effective as soon as the project starts, or is it going to be prorated at the end of the third year, the second year, we'll be paying that 112?
I don't have that document in front of me. We asked our financial advisor to create what the cost would be over time.
That's the maximum
That's-
that it carries out to.
Is that start as soon as the project starts? But my point is, are we getting that money up front? Or that money is sent to us as it's needed to pay the
The aid.
contractors?
Oh, the aid.
You know what I'm
You're
saying?
talking about
One of the
the
reasons
aid
it's over
program.
15 years. That, can I?
Mr. Staff, please.
Building aid, unlike other categorical aids, comes as you spend. It matches the year with the expenditure based on the debt service that you have. Some of our other aids are based on what we spent last year, or what we expended last year. Building aid is what you expend the year that you expended. So the state,
So what I was trying to get really is that if we go in the year 2000, we're going to be saving the 89 cents. Are we automatically jumping to that 112, or is it going to be prorated, or that 112 will start automatically be a saving?
the 112 wouldn't go into effect. Well, first of all, you wouldn't borrow the 30 million all at once.
I'm just, this one.
And it would be staggered. And one of the reasons also is because we will be, during the time period in which we're not expending the funds, it will be invested. We're earning interest. So that will offset some of the expenditures and costs associated with it. And you got to be careful because there's arbitrage. In other words, because we're a municipality, there is a potential where you can borrow money, invest it, and make more. There's a differential. I mean, I can borrow the money for 4, and I get 5% when I put it in a CD. I'd borrow as much money as I could, okay? But there's laws against that. So we have to be very careful, and that's why we work very carefully with a fiscal advisor to ensure that we don't break those laws. But we also, at the same time, want to maximize our opportunity to earn interest. Now, of course, that opportunity to earn interest goes away when the construction project is fully expended, and we've expended those funds because you don't have the money earning the interest. So the 72 cents actually represents the worst further out. Okay, another impact is because it's per thousand. okay, it's actually potentially even less, because we know the wealth of the district increases, has historically increased as far as the property value, okay? So that distribution of expenditure is placed over more. Okay, what I did was took a snapshot in time this year and then carried it out. So the actual net impact to people will even be less if you really wanted to get technical.
That's good news.
Okay, do you have to spend your local share first before you get the state aid?
Not, it would match. In other words, they give you, if you expend X number of dollars, you get 85 cents. I mean, in this scenario, you get 85
Okay, so
cents.
you just match the local share as you get the money.
Right.
You're always short 15%.
15%.
Say if
You're
you
always
need 2 million,
correct.
you'll get
Yeah.
it less 15%.
Yeah. The state will pay you both on the interest that you're expending as well as the principal you're retiring.
Okay, advantages of community. We would be able, what we're looking for basically is to expand opportunities for adult education. We know for a fact that in the future, there's going to be jobs out there that people don't even know about. They can't even describe them. So we're going to have students that we're going to graduate who are going to, over time, not have the skills necessary for other jobs. If we have the opportunity with more space and access to that additional space, for people to come in and use our computers and be able to be retrained and retooled for new challenges, not only does that benefit the school, but it benefits the community because it allows people to, with very limited and small costs, get the type of education they need for competition for other career opportunities.
This would be offered free to district people?
I'm sorry?
Would this be offered free to district people?
Sometimes there's, first of all, we get some money back for having adult education, get some aid. But if, like, say for instance, we were teaching a computer course, we'd probably ask you to bring in your discs. I don't know what we'll be using then, but you probably would have to pay for discs. If we bought a book, you might have to pay for that. But otherwise, we take care of that cost.
Well, that's the stuff
That would be what the district would take care of.
that 40 cents would take care of it.
That the 40 extra cents? No, that's the aid I said that you can get when you run an adult education program.
So it would be zero or something.
It would,
The aid would pay for the stuff.
this is not building aid, this is aid that you get when you have an adult education program. So we'd be seeking out those funds because we would have the facilities for people to come in and use. We also potential for pre-K. I don't know if you have been noticing or have noticed all the discussion about pre-K programs, and the reason it's out there is because with all these new standards, what we're looking for is children to be ready to begin right away, to start working towards reaching those standards. And that opportunity right now, as we did the research, the Universal Pre-K Advisory Board researched the area, and there really isn't a lot of pre-K experiences out there for children that's cost effective. Again, state ed says we will give you X amount of money if you will, work with X number of children. If we have the space in our building to do it, we will take in that money and use that to pay for the pre-K. And we have opportunities for that money to be available in a phase-in fashion up to 145 children, which is over $100,000, almost close to $200,000 in aid that we can give back to provide the programming for those children. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Beor so that she can go over this part. And before she does it, though, I appreciate the fact that you are asking good questions and helping us see how you're seeing our presentation. Because we're going to be putting a flyer together that's going to go out to everybody in the community. And if this is not clear, then we have to make it clear. So I want to thank you for that, all your feedback in that area. Ms. Beor.
think I'm gonna need the pointer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just a new toy.
I know, well, once you get hooked on it. These types of presentations are one of the more challenging parts of my job as an architect. Because as I've ridden up to Beekmantown or flown up here, I think of the word always perspective. Okay, when I've talked to the board over the last several months, and Mr. Sapp and Ms. Urbach, we're talking about $30 million. It's a huge amount of money. Okay, and I need to get this in perspective as I come before you to try to explain the project. And one of the ways to do that is to think about the capital investment, the infrastructure that you have right now. This school district almost owns debt-free, operates, maintains, instructs in almost 300,000 square feet of space. It is a huge operation. And even as you come in this building, you can get the sense that it's a very large building, but you add up all the other district buildings. So this is a very large physical plan. As we start to look at what the components of the project are and you break it down per square foot, we're talking about infrastructure improvements, maintenance, renovations that are in the order of magnitude of $24 a square foot to maintain. Well, aside from some of the other projects that you've done, as Ms. Urbach mentioned, additions projects primarily, not a lot of renovation. There has been relatively little capital investment over the 40-year life of these buildings in many cases on average, so you've really got good bang for your buck so far. Our goal, the question that the gentleman asked, obviously, we want to provide the new facilities that are going to give you that same value over the long term. As we look at the $30 million price tag, and I know that Mr. Urbach is putting together other information to send out to you, there'll be more detailed information in the breakdown. But as we started to look at our study of the district, we broke it down into several areas. And the first area was what we call infrastructure. It's your existing buildings. What needs do the existing buildings have? These buildings are very, very well maintained, and I know there's a slide of a decaying water tank, and we could probably hone in on some real horror stories on the roof, et cetera, et cetera. Again, that roof, most of the roof on this building is original. It's 40 years old, okay? So even though, again, you think perspective, you think $30 million, what have they been doing with all that money I've been paying in taxes all these years? How could these buildings need $30 million worth of work? Well, when you think about the gross square footage and you think about the part of the budget that's attributable to what we call infrastructure, over $4 million of that line item is just for roofs and heating systems and electrical upgrades. It's not rocket science, it's not glamorous, it's basically, everybody knows that electrical services in any sort of service building, whether it's a school or a hospital, an office, we're doing the same thing in our office just this week, upgrading electrical services to support technology. It's an expensive proposition when you're dealing with 300,000 square feet of space. The roofs are a huge piece of it. We've got almost $2 million worth of roofing that's going on in this building, 200,000 square feet. It's a huge amount of roof to replace. The other infrastructure items, again, many of these components of your building have worn out. Okay, the tanks have worn out, some of the valves have worn out. So we're talking about replacing those things just as you would in your home. The other significant category of the budget, the overall $30 million budget, are the classroom additions. About $10 million of the $30 million is allocated toward the classroom additions. There's 33 new classrooms. I'm going to go through the plan with you, but again, just perspective as we start to talk about this. There's another $7 million of the overall budget that looks at reorganization of space. And I think your question was a good one, as you say, is this going to do it for the next 15 years? And even though I respect Ms. Urbach's answer, this district, as well as every district in New York State, is subject to influences that come out of Albany that sometimes are all over, okay? If everything stays about the same, what we can envision, if they import 50 new programs that they say you've got to teach in Beekmantown and every other school district in New York State, and they say, you've got to have a separate classroom, it's got to be this many square feet, it really doesn't matter what we plan today. I think that this is a very well-balanced plan, personally, for the reasons that Ms. Urbach has stated, in part because you have such a large population at this building, it affords you a lot of flexibility, okay? But the new classrooms obviously are needed for programs that weren't around when this building was built. One of the other questions that's very often asked is, geez, I can't quote the exact numbers, but we had 3,000 kids in this building at one time. Now we've got 2,000 kids. How come you need more space? Very legitimate question. Education today is completely different than it was 30 years ago. Remedial, special education, support services, technology, media, all these programs that did not exist when this building was designed and constructed. So that's what these new classrooms will do. The renovations or the reconfigurations of the existing spaces will take those, computers that are plugged in with all the outlets shoved into a closet and calling it a resource room and creating a space that can actually support that. The goal, obviously, is to support teaching and learning. You don't raise your standards just by making a nice new space, but it certainly goes a long way to allowing the teachers to do their jobs and helping in that regard. And then the final $4.2 million of the budget is attributed to technology, as Ms. Urbach stated. About half of that, again, is the infrastructure to support technology. The other half, which is not going to all be spent in the first year, is to provide the hardware, the software to support that, again, the teaching and learning. So it's a little hard to stand before you and talk about $30 million as if it's a drop in the bucket, because it's not. But again, if you look at the magnitude of what this district entails. I'm going to walk through the plans that we've developed that can illustrate only a portion of the project. The other challenge that I have as I stand before you is so much of what we're doing, you can't illustrate in a pretty picture. I mean, I can show you a roof detail, but that's really not going to help you too much. We're going to talk about some of the technicalities, some of the challenges you mentioned, I think, about the second story. We can talk about that. But the plans that we show here are really just to give you a sense of the conceptual ideas of how the spaces are going to be organized, and so much more that you just can't show graphically. So we're going to start with the main building. And as we looked with the Board of Education, the requirements of the project, obviously budget was an overriding criteria as we looked at options. The plans that you see here tonight are really, the final version of what was many renditions, many different options. We certainly didn't come to Beekmantown with any preconceived ideas, and we did look at a variety of options, many of which have been pointed out by people in the audience. As we look at this building, and we're in it, and I assume that you're pretty familiar with it, we have some unique challenges here in that we are pretty much landlocked in this corner of the building. We know that there's some potential right here on this corner, but the other land that's available to us is pretty well occupied by existing components to your property. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be some disruption. It doesn't mean that we couldn't have added the gym over here and moved the football field, or that we could have added all the additions down this way. What we tried to do in the plan was to balance the criteria. Number one is, the financial obligation to make a well-balanced plan, number one. Number two, to try to maintain as much as possible the investment that you have. And after a lot of discussion, we decided that, even though we could put the gym where the football field is, and maybe that would have some advantages programmatically in the building, was that really an economical and prudent decision? Ultimately, the decision was made that was not. So as we look at this plan in detail, you'll see that we've tried to respect the existing infrastructure, tried not to unnecessarily disturb what you have here now. Essentially, on this building, we have 3 major addition locations. And again, the next level of review as you start looking at a project of this magnitude is how do the additions or how do the expansions or reconfigurations fit programmatically. This is a very large building from a floor plan standpoint, from a traffic standpoint. We have some very significant limitations as I'm thinking conceptually. You have all of the children sharing a cafeteria, previously sharing a gym. There's many other shared spaces, shared entrances, and whatnot. Well, one of the concepts could have been, okay, we're going to create a new elementary wing, and so we're going to add that down here. Now you create a situation where these students have to travel even further to get into the core. The other option is you expand the core. Well, did we really want to build another cafeteria? Again, we we needed to be economical as we looked at those 4 facilities. So part of the concept here was to try to keep the plan a little bit on the tight side to eliminate these long traffic areas, which you already have now. So we wanted not to exasperate that. From the high school, middle school point of view, I think that the ultimate solution to go to the 2nd floor in this area served a multitude of those objectives that we had. Number one, it does not impinge on what we see as already an overcrowded footprint, but it also allows for us as the board who might create a nest for the middle school. Those children still have to share some facilities with the other grades. They're still going to the same cafeteria. They're going to the same library. In some cases, they'd be coming down for some technology, home ec. Could we have just abandoned all of that and built this separate just for that group? Absolutely. Would we be standing before you having you buy that was a good solution? Absolutely not. Okay, so we feel that was a good decision there. I'm going to talk about the budgets a little bit later, and we can debate some of those concerns that you have. Similarly with the elementary, the concept in putting the 2nd floor in this location, again, consolidates the population. Don't spread them out any further, certainly from a supervision standpoint, from a security standpoint. There's well-documented evidence that this type of situation can actually help with that. And then the gym is was probably one of the most difficult design decisions or design processes that we had, because there were many criteria. Could we have put the gym somewhere else? Absolutely. If we did that, we would have impacted something else on the site that would then have resulted in additional cost. So ultimately what we said is, what do we have that's fixed? We have the football field that's fixed. We have the existing parking that's fixed, because we don't want to build over that and then have to replace it. And we have these other features on the site. The other issue with the gym, and Ms. Urbach mentioned this, or she alluded to it, when you're putting a project together, there are pieces that fit together like a puzzle. In order to achieve the maximum building aid, which we want to receive 100% of this project aidable to the max, then we have to follow the rules of SED. So as you look at this project, the way that we can build this gym is because we're building classrooms. It's a complex formula, but essentially the gym generates a very low aid ratio in and of itself. Classrooms create a very high aid ratio, particularly some special service classrooms. Use the excess aid for the classrooms to offset the gym and come out with a balanced project. Similarly, as we look at the population, as we look at how the building is utilized, SED also dictates to us how many classrooms we can build, how many gyms we can build, how many cafeterias we can build. So it was important to us as we located the gym to tie into the existing gym and gain renovation aid on that gym. One of the obvious questions that we received on the board level, on the committee level, and from the public is, why did you build a brand new gym and keep the gym you have? And then we're going to have, 2 plus, the other support areas. Well, SAD wouldn't allow you to do that, okay? Because you don't have the populations to support it. So what we need to do is find the best possible use for the old gym, not just rip it down and abandon it, to support the new building construction. So that's essentially the concept, the ideas as we were looking at how to plan the site. We can draw with straight lines. I think it's the projector, so don't get concerned as you see this is a little bit skewed just from a presentation standpoint. The areas that you see on this plan, again, this is the main building. The areas that you see in yellow represent the additions, and the areas that you see in blue represent reconfigurations. Now, again, as we looked at the master plan of this building, we looked at how the programs would best fit together. In many of these cases, we're talking about relabeling classrooms. You can see in this location, this is the area of the old gym. We're going to be converting a portion of that into locker rooms to support the new facility. We're going to be reorganizing and reconfiguring some of the classrooms. Reconfiguring, I don't know if that's a word. Reconfiguring some of the classrooms in the elementary and other areas throughout. Small addition to support the library media center. Small addition to support the cafeteria. This area here that you see is part of the high school. That's the area above which we're going to build the addition. This is the second floor. Currently, as we all know, there is no second floor to this building. We do have two-story spaces, some two-story spaces, this being one of them. In the gymnasium, we're going to capture that second space, okay? Create a multi-purpose weight room, not weight room, physical fitness room to support the PE, and also designated some of that space for mechanical systems to support the gym. Obviously, the gymnasium is going to be a two-story space. The actual footprint is much larger than you have now, and the plan also calls for a track to circle the upper level of the gym, not so different from Saranac, although designed differently, but conceptually the same. So you see here we have a classroom addition to support the middle school concept, again, the nest. That is not to imply that there still will be some crossover traffic, but it will be like night and day compared to what you have now, obviously. And again, that's a balance of what could be done, practically and cost effectively. And then again, we've got the classroom addition here on the elementary. There is so much more as part of this project, again, that we can't really illustrate graphically, but that sums up the additions and renovations at the main building. There is a small addition scheduled for the bus garage for storage and to support their facilities, but other than that, the only other building that's receiving an addition is Cumberland Head. Again, this is the first floor of Cumberland Head, and you can see that the blue areas you can't really distinguish clearly. I can show you on the screen afterwards if you need more detail. The areas that would be impacted by renovations. Obviously, if you have a second story on any public building, you have to provide handicap accessibility, which comes by virtue of an elevator. So you can see that there's a small addition shown on the first floor to support that. Again, it was determined that the second story addition was an effective way to provide the additional space. We're able to tie into the existing corridor. There will be some ramping here to allow for change in elevations, and then the classroom addition. So I'm certainly available to answer any questions that you have. I'd like just to talk about roofs because that's been a very popular topic in many of our talks with the public, and just maybe to prompt that discussion or to maybe clarify our concept. Anybody in the North Country knows that roofs leak, and I'm not going to stand here and tell you that they don't. You have been extremely fortunate in this building that you have a 40-year-old roof, and yes, there's buckets in the hallway, and yes, you have some stained tiles, but you've certainly gotten your money. You've got a lot of mileage out of the roof. So I hear this question all the time. Why don't you put a slope roof on? Flat roof leak. You've got to put a slope roof on the building. Personally, as a designer, as an architect, as a technician, I have personally designed buildings, schools with slope roofs, new construction, okay? I was at a walkthrough today in a school district, actually west of Watertown. New building was built in '89, slope roofs throughout, very pleasing aesthetically. They put shingles on it, and part of their program 10 years later is to take that roof off. And one of the board members actually asked me, can you flatten the roof, okay? So there is no nirvana when it comes to roofs, okay? The fact is that, it's not a perfect world. But in this particular application, and in many of the applications that I deal with in renovating old schools, sloped roof situations are not always practical. They aren't always a good investment. And in many cases, it's just the opposite for many reasons. Number one, this building was not designed for a slope roof. In order to achieve a slope on a roof, you obviously have to install some structure to hold it. That has to be designed to carry the snow load. That load then has to transfer to the structure underneath it. That is not to say it cannot be done. There's a school district that we're working with who did a multi-million-dollar roof replacement down in Franklin County. They put a metal roof on an existing building just like this. And there are strong supporters and there are strong detractors. That is a very complex technical challenge, and anybody who would tell you differently is not being totally truthful. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge with a slope roof on an existing building has to do with what do you do with the snow and the water and the ice. Again, if you have a slope situation, you know this from your own homes, The water is going to come down somewhere. This building was not designed with a perimeter drainage system to support that magnitude of water. The water that is gathered on your roof now is drained through an internal drainage system that goes, to your external on-site drainage system. It's a very costly proposition to install a drainage system that will handle the water now coming off the gutters. It can be done. All right, so that's the second challenge. If you don't deal with the water, then you're in a situation where you've got foundation problems, and this is very often overlooked. The third challenge, and probably the one that, from a professional standpoint, that I am most concerned about slope roofs on schools is ice. And again, I have personally been involved in doing this in new buildings, and it scares me to death. When I go there in the middle of winter and I see these big ice jams, and I know the maintenance people have, the best at heart. I know they put the electrical strips up there to keep the ice off because that's our technical recommendation. I know electricity costs a lot of money and they forget to turn the switch, and guess what? Where you have children and you have hundreds of pounds of ice built up on a roof, you have a dangerous situation. Now, that can be debated back and forth, but that's my personal professional concern in that regard. And then the final issue when it comes to sloped roofs on existing buildings, again, if we're talking about a new building, it would be a little bit different, is that when you look at the long-term cost of a sloped roof versus a flat roof on an existing building, very often there is not a favorable cost-life ratio. For example, the cost to put on a sloped roof on this building, in all likelihood, would be over 3 times the cost to install a new flat roof system over this building. In a flat roof situation, you can get a 20-year warranty. Now, that doesn't mean that if the roof fails in 20 years, you're going to get a brand new roof, because the warranty depreciates as the life of the roof is on. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have to call your attorney to enact the warranty if you have a catastrophic failure. It's not a perfect world. I'm not going to stand here and say that I stand behind roof warranties, but they are in place. You do buy them, and they can provide for the maintenance and the replacement of the roof over time. In a sloped roof situation, unless you're building a new building, and I know of no sloped roof application where you can obtain a system warranty. I know of none. So, for example, flat roof, you get a Firestone warranty for the membrane, for the roof, for the installation. If anything goes wrong, the warranty covers that. On a flat roof, you can get a 40-year warranty on shingles. Okay? Well, if the shingle blows off, and now the guy who put the shingle on, or the manufacturer of the shingle comes back and says, well, geez, it's not a shingle problem, it's a substrate problem. Now you're going after the substrate guy, and then they come back and say, well, geez, the roof shifted, the metal of the structure. You don't have the same level of protection. The fact of the matter is, if you look at the long-term cost, you could replace the roof in a flat situation before you could pay off the slope. And anyone who tells you differently, it's a very complex technical challenge to put a slope roof on an existing building. The reality is that this building moves in a way that could only be modeled seismographically. If you really wanted to do it right, the roof is going to shift, okay? It's going to shift in a way that we don't know, and that could create problems. So that's a long answer to a little tiny question. You can tell I feel pretty passionately about that because I hear this question a lot. That doesn't mean that if a client came to me and slammed their fist on the table and said, do it, I probably have to do it, but my advice, my professional advice is that it's not a wise decision on many levels. So that's my spiel on roofs, and I'll shut up because I know we've been going on for a while and try to answer any questions you have.
We've been talking about the different pitch of roof, but you can talk to us, I didn't mention it very quickly.
Yep, rubber membrane.
Versus what we have
Yeah, basically right now is you have a 2, 3, and 5 ply as best we can gather bitumen roof insulation. The current technology, the standard in the industry is basically a rubber membrane. Several years ago, you may recall, it was PVC. They had a lot of problems with PVC roof shattering. The technology wasn't really up to snuff. The current rubber membranes are good. hardwood. The cost differential between those and PVC doesn't make a lot of sense, so we're talking about a PVC.
Using that over the existing roof without.
No, we'll take the old roof off. There are many cases on the existing roof where the deterioration of the wear or the weather has actually infiltrated the bitumen, and you actually got some failure of the roof. Not failure, you've got some deterioration of the roof deck. So what we are proposing is to strip it right down and start right over. And we would probably need to do that to get the closest warranty. Either way, so. And you know a lot about roofs, so I need to hear.
No, I don't know anything about roofs.
Oh, you don't know anything about roofs? Okay.
I was concerned about the improvements to the track, the all weather. And that's going to be a composition material. And of course, the children will need special kind of track shoes with tacks in them. How will that benefit the athletes when they go to other fields that don't have that? They will be training on one type of shoe and have to run their competition with another shoe.
Yeah, the track surface that we're looking at is basically a combination of rubberized asphalt track. I am not aware that you cannot run on it in a standard rubberized cleat. I know you cannot run on it with a metal cleat, but I'm not sure there's any interscholastic sports that allow that.
From when I was running, what you do is you change the depth of your cleats. I mean, there's a.
Yeah, that rubberized track, you have a little short tack on your cleat.
Yeah, so you
You
just.
train in that shoe, and then you go to a track that has soft dirt and need a longer spike. That throws your whole running balance out, so I can't see spending the money on that rough unless the other schools put it in. Because you have no advantage to our athletes.
I'm not sure what your region has as far as other
Well,
tracks.
that rubberized track could be what, $300?
Saranac, I know.
No,
Well, you know,
Saranac has that.
You know Saranac does. Tupper has.
Like Placer has, Northeastern is going to have.
Yeah. I think it's
What is
becoming
that,
more.
something you put on the asphalt? Or is it just,
Yeah,
it's a coating on the asphalt?
It's actually put on very much like an asphalt, but it's rubberized. So
What's the
essentially,
base?
well, the base would be a gravel sub base and then a layer of asphalt,
Yeah, okay, this
and
is
then
a
this
45
on top of it. But it's not a painted on surface. It's actually, I can't quote the depth, but probably like a half of an inch of surface material. It's
So
not
this
like
is put on there and
Yeah.
it's almost like tennis court.
Yeah, it's a hot applied asphalt base rubberized surface. Yeah, and Saranac's probably the closest example maybe that we just did that down there a few years ago. What's that? Probably.
The outside.
Yeah. I'm not sure, I've never been there, but it's a pretty common track surface.
Can you go back a little bit?
Sure.
You mentioned earlier, you're going to have some kind of drainage system down there. Even if you use the rubber line.
Yeah, we'll tie into the existing drainage system.
So
Right now, you've got internal roof drains that basically the roof at the different points drain in, and we'll tie into that. Yeah, the point with that is that if you change the pitch of the roof, you know, the drainage is a very significant issue relative to that. And, you know, the other point, just graphically, if you think about it, really, and you look at it, I mean, look at the geometry of this building, you know, and, you know, you can put a gable this way, and one this way, and one this way, you've got peaks and valleys, you've also got a lot of roof-mounted equipment, you've got vents, it's just, again, it's a new situation, I'd be much more open-minded, but it's a very impractical, very costly.
And then going to the big one, you had a little bit of a temple, last year's end, which was
Could you put that in quotes? Can I carry that around with me?
on the hand, without this.
Yeah, these are executed in this district.
You know, this is a really difficult thing for us to be dealing with because we do have this structure. We inherited. This is what we have. You know, this is my home. This is where the children and I live. And we can't put a for sale sign out there Nobody's gonna come by this place, trust me. If I could, if I could just say, this is gone, take it away on your trucks, and let me create a whole new building, I bet my architects could give me a project for less money. I bet you they could. But we really have to deal with what we have. And I'm very glad Fior made it clear, you never know what state it says. Of course, my dream is that this is the last time I'll have to be doing this. But you never know what life is going to hold for yourself. I'm the Pollyanna of the world. I always am looking for the best in things. What I appreciate is that you took the time tonight to come here and at least listen. Even if you don't agree with us, that's okay. At least you gave me a shot to tell you about what we want to do and why we want to do it. And answer your questions. And that's all we want to do. Have the opportunity to do that. As I said, you may have noticed a quote in the paper, no, I'm not looking for a Mercedes-Benz. I'm looking for a good, solid Ford. I want a Ford that I can count on, that every time I go out there and turn that puppy on, it's going to run. And the same too here. I want something that my children will be able to do what they have to do. I want them to have a place where they can learn. I want my teachers to have a place where they can teach. And the financial piece, we'll work on that. We'll make it clear. That's the best we can. But we wouldn't be able to do that unless you gave us this feedback so we know what's clear and what's not clear. I don't know, Mr. Sapp, you've been sitting back there. Do you have any financial words of wisdom that you'd like to share with us before we close that we haven't covered or want to add something?
I think we talked about that. I don't know that
Can I ask you a naive question? This probably is, but is there any way the district in the long run can keep from having a $30 million project pulled down? I mean, like preventive maintenance, proactive. I don't know how to phrase it. I know that I suppose you can't stash money away for capital improvements, for state aid, but is there a way to try to keep things moving and maintaining them so that you don't wake up and have another 40-year nightmare or 20-year nightmare for yourself or, for the district?
I understand what you're saying, and I'll make a comment and then I'll ask you.
Is that an SAD possibility?
Well, here's what you look at. You look at what you've done so far, and you've been very, very conservative over the years dealing with those things as it came up and had to be dealt with. But things get old and eventually you have to be replaced. So you can't ever stop that process from occurring. What we're trying to do with this project is to get a lot done when it's in our best financial interest. So, I don't know that we could work harder to keep the place up because I think that people work very hard to keep it.
And actually, you mentioned is that an SAD thing? And it is. And it really is part of one of the impositions that are placed upon a school district. The fact is that they can do maintenance, okay? They can do preventative maintenance, in some districts, they build their own cabinets and they do, lots of other stuff. The fact is that if the district does those things on their own, over and above what has obviously been done a good job, anything capital, they don't get building aid on it if they do it themselves. And so most districts, the reality is that even though they may have a very healthy maintenance budget, that is just to keep the building going. There's no, reserve maintenance budget. There's no savings account to say, okay, we're going to save up all this local taxpayer dollar to replace the boiler. SED doesn't work that way. If you need to do wholesale changes, improvements, it has to be done through a capital project. Now, it's a really twisted approach, and every year, and Mr. Sapp can account for this, every year the legislature comes out with some new program, long-term maintenance, facility study. A few years ago it was a capital assessment project program where they were going to try to change the way they funneled money to school districts so that on some wacky percentage, they could allocate so much building aid to do those things. At this point, you can't do it, and it's really not financially in the school's best interest to try to do any sort of capital improvement under a local budget situation. There's no way you can afford it. So really, their hands are tied in many, many ways, and a lot of districts do save up. And I'm not saying, because I'm new to this district, just this year was hired, I'm not sure what the philosophy was. I think it was very conservative. Interest rates were not great, the building aid wasn't that great, and, you can't afford to do a lot. Now the conditions are different, but I think in some sense things were saved up until they could be done, in a capital project that would be attractive to the voters. So again, that tends to be a long answer, and I apologize.
Well,
That's why.
This example, we need storage space over at the bus garage, and we looked at the difference in what it would cost if our own people did it, and what it would cost if we made it part of our building budget. And we are going to see a savings.
Yeah, because you're paying 15 cent dollars, basically.
Just a question. You had mentioned several times that you didn't want to have too many built-ins in the rooms to keep them flexible. But other than the shell of the room, what are going to, like for example, I'm assuming everything's going to have phones and what things will be in the rooms when you leave?
Well, as far as this, and that is true in large part for general recitation classrooms. Okay, there's specialty areas like the science rooms, etc., obviously the furniture. The budget does include that the rooms that you saw that were highlighted in blue specifically, okay, as well as the yellows, would be outfitted as new classrooms when they're complete. So, built-in cabinetry, phones, outlets, lights, chalkboards, visuals, that sort of thing. There's also in the budget that you can't see here, because you can't really illustrate it, the data system that would be throughout. So every room would be upgraded in that regard. There's also an opportunity, because the budget, as SED establishes the incidental account, does allow for furniture and equipment, so that once you're all done, you're not left with empty classrooms. You don't have to go through your regular budget. You can outfit these rooms through the capital project. So basically, any room that we touch in yellow or blue will be brand new rooms with everything complete, and in other areas throughout the building, there'll be other improvements, again, that you can't illustrate, and then some potential for furniture and equipment upgrades.
I mean, every room will be touched. Every room will be touched in terms of technology, in terms of heating and ventilation, which are major things. Obviously, a building of this age, when it was built, and certainly during a time when we had an energy crisis, there was an enormous movement towards not as in tune in terms of air quality. Air quality is becoming an enormous issue now. And this is an old building, and it wasn't adequately ventilated. Okay, and inadequate ventilation causes decay, and it causes issues, as well as potential health issues. I guess the theme that has been brought forward is that the time is now. One of the reasons, obviously, is this financial window of opportunity. It has aligned itself now in terms of the financial aspect. We're talking about low interest rates, we're talking about retirement of debt, and you're talking about this additional 10%. Those three things are enormous issues. And just like a window, it opens and it closes, okay? The current legislation, that window is open for that additional 10%. Okay? There is no indication of how long that's going to stay open, and it is probable that it will close in the relative near future. So this does present an opportunity, a window of opportunity.
Yes, the vote is on June 22nd, and we have another public session next Thursday. So if you know anyone who would like some additional information, our architect's been wonderful about being here with us. And we also have a public hearing, that following the 15th, before the 22nd. We also have, you get flyers at your house. You should be receiving flyers. And on that, we also list the dates when you can either go to a building-specific informational experience, or you can come to the general one, which Do we have any other questions? Yes, sir.
When you send out some more publicity, if you could change that, it's going to cost 2% less to borrow money than within our previous things. Give the actual percentage rate. Because I read that thing over 3 times and I jumped to the conclusion that we're only going to pay 2% on the borrowing of money. And then turn around and invest it at 5% on CDs, making a 3% profit. But then I saw less and I said, oops, I go. It's easy to do because there's combinations of numbers and words. And when you see numbers, you think numbers. You don't think words. So if you're going to put out future stuff, say we will be borrowing money at 5.25%, possibly anticipating at putting it in investments at 5.75%, 5%, or whatever you want to put it.
I'm sorry? Where do we get the
Money
money?
is what I thought, where do you serial loss?
Cereal? I'm sorry. Where do we get the money that we're going to?
It would be a serial bond. There might be initial borrowing directly from the bank in the form of a BAN, bond anticipation note.
And you're gonna pay over 5%?
Excuse me?
You're gonna pay over 5%? You better do the
The
shop.
estimation is about 5%.
You better shop there.
Well, that's why we have financial advisors. Their job is to help us with that. We have a bond lawyer who takes attorney who will take care of that. He will get us the very best price.
You should be paying.
We've really stepped out of my realm of expertise.
No, but I've
Well, isn't it fun?
I've been involved in borrowing money
Oh.
for college, and we don't pay for it. In fact, I'm also involved in her.
I think another thing I just want to mention, and
We
this
don't pay 4%. So I think, we're not talking money like you are. I think we really get that.
I'd like to talk to you after this.
we
to be
will.
honest with you.
as I said, we have an excellent bond attorney and we have financial advisors, so that's their job. That's why we're paying them to do best at what they do.
And, when we do our estimates, we try to be conservative. So when I tell you that 5%, 5.5%, it's probably a little bit lower. But I'm not going to go.
You should be talking about that. I mean, I'm not financial, and I do it myself. I have no advice, and I do it myself. So
There are
you
also
should-
some
I mean,
rules.
it talks quite a lot, 1% for a lot of money.
That's true. When we're talking about doing something in a school, we are governed by different rules than a person.
No, I'm not doing it for
But I just wanted to bring that issue up because it governs how we go about constructing. The law tells us how to do that. It tells us about the codes. We have to meet federal codes, state codes, local codes. If you ever did any additions in your own house, you know that you have to have somebody come in and tell you what you can and can't do. Education in New York State, and it's my only experience, so I can't talk about others, has very stringent rules on how we operate. And so that's why we hire the people we do to give us their financial information. What we've tried to do, and I think it's important that you at least know what our attempt was, is to give a very conservative picture so that at another time you don't say to us, well, why did you give us such a liberal view? Why didn't you give us a more conservative view? So that's what we're trying to do.
No, but I'm just saying, I think that you better start looking about that rate up there on.
We certainly are going to look for the best price possible. You can count on that. That one you can take to the bank. We will be looking for the best percentage we
So
can
I just,
possibly.
because when I heard that, I know I'm involved in things like that, and we wouldn't even talk about it. You don't have to.
Do we have any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming.